Hello, my name is Andrew Obeng, and I'm going to walk you through synth making. It, I figured it'd be pretty interesting to show like something I do in my free time, and like synth making is something I really like doing, and it's like really fun. And so anyway, um, I made a little synth. It's nothing really fancy, but it does what it does pretty well. It has kind of weird organy sound. And yeah, it's once again, it's nothing like extremely complicated, but it is something like it's definitely kind of showcases like what this sort of process is like. And so I want to actually go through and kind of walk through the steps of how I actually went about and made this because once again, I thought it'd be pretty cool if I actually showed you how I actually work. And so I actually have a base version of this exact same synthesizer right here. If you notice, sounds completely different from the one I just played. And so I'm going to walk you through how I did basically all of this. Um, just some basics. Every synthesizer uses oscillators to create waveforms. These waveforms obviously create the sound. And so, like for example, like right here we have like this synth, which is called Helm. It uses two oscillators. There, and so like I can alternate between the waveforms here. So there is defaults to a saw wave, but there is a square wave, a triangle wave, and a sine wave. Those are only like a handful of them, but they're pretty representative. And so for this synth that I made, I used a combination of a square and a sine wave. Um, for and I actually for the square wave, I transposed this up 24 semitones. Well, if you look at which is essentially one octave above it. So if I'm playing on piano, it's one C above middle C. And so like it has actually a somewhat different effect if you compare it to this bass sound. Um, the next thing I did was I modulated that I used this mod wheel. Essentially, by moving this up and down, I can combine the attributes of both waveforms to create something new. So, for example, it sounds like this right now, and by doing this, moving this up, it's a little bit harsh, and I'd rather not play that for any significant period of time, but it works. Um, the next thing I did was mess with the filter. The filter basically kind of as the name implies, kind of filters the sound through a sort of like filters the sound through like a weird sort of filter thing that essentially kind of changes how it sounds as well. So you have drive, which makes it louder or softer. The makes more or less makes the sound louder or softer, and then you have the envelope depth, which changes the amount the actual filter affects the sound. So for this, I used this filter setting, and then I basically brought this all the way down, and then I moved this up a few I moved the envelope depth up a few semitones, and then I bumped the drive a little down because I kind of wanted a softer feel. And we're kind of getting to that really soft organy sound that I had earlier. All right. Um. So the next thing I did was I messed with the amplitude envelope. Basically, there are 4 different things that affect the sound here, and this whole thing deals with how the affects how the note is played. So, to go through each of them very briefly, like attack controls controls how the delay between the note being played and the note actually being sounded. So right now it has a very low attack, which makes it very quick, very sharp. If I make the attack a little bit longer, you hear that it actually takes a little bit of time for it to come in. So for the decay, is basically like how long it takes a note to actually fade out. And like this is very hard to demonstrate. Like you hear that this is very sudden, and like this is more or less you don't really hear this unless you mess with the other 2. So sustain is basically how long the note like how long after the note is played is it held. So right now it's at full sustain, so it means as long as I'm playing the note, it will always remain. However, if I lower the sustain like this, I get a when I play it, it gets quieter. It's actually very useful. And then release is how long after you've let go of the note does it continue to play. So like it has that really kind of nice bleed over effect. Yeah, and so for this synth, I use a bit of attack. And I actually give it a little bit of release. Like, mind you, this is not going to be exact because I'm more or less doing this by memory, but you get a pretty interesting sound if you just do this. And then for this, truthfully, I don't understand this synthesizer in great detail, but I actually upped the attack on this envelope filter, which essentially all of this is more or less the same. It just affects how the envelopes kind of affects the sound itself. We are almost done with this, but like there was 1 or 2 things that I liked to do. I used a bit of portamento, which is essentially like the sliding between notes. So right now, if I play 1 note and I play another, those 2 will play like fairly normally. If I use this little knob here, and then I turn this portamento up, when I play the second note, or I might have to turn this up a little bit more, when I play the second note, it slides up to whatever that second note. So it's pretty useful for creating like some pretty interesting sounds and interesting effects. That really should be everything. And like there's a whole lot of stuff here that I didn't really mess with. So like I can add more reverb, which essentially gives it a more like roomy feel. Like it makes it sound like it's actually playing in a space. Here's a stutter that essentially loops the sound of it back in on itself, so it creates this like interesting like repeating effect. There's feedback, which I'm not gonna mess with because that's gonna hurt everyone's ears. And then there's an arpeggiator, which basically means that plays the note in arpeggios, which is essentially like steps, like some like couple note steps up. But like that's really for the synth. More or less, this is everything I did to get the synth sound that I got. It's not exact because I'm more or less not using this as a reference. But I do think this is a fairly representative of what I actually do. So yeah.